Yo, the Foul Hooked Whitey is back. Episode 2, the Russians are coming. And I left off in episode 1 talking about my experience in getting to know these Russians. And like I said previously, these Russians on this liveaboard while my group was fishing the JDR, the Jardines de la Reina in Cuba. It was an incredible experience learning about how I need to think before I speak. And that's a damn good piece of advice for this podcast. So we didn't go on this trip to have this experience with these Russians who were there diving, but it was a byproduct of a wonderful week. And, the purpose of us going, obviously, was the fly fishing. And, I fish Cuba a fair amount, and I love Cuba. Namely because Cuba's not overfished. It's not fished anywhere like the Yucatan in Mexico or the Bahamas or really any other region, Florida. I mean, it's just not. And there's factors why that's the case. And one of those factors is that 99% of all Cubans aren't allowed to have a fucking boat. And why is that? Because if a Cuban gets a boat, he's probably going to escape that shit or try. I mean, some of the Cubans that have drowned and some of the Cubans that have been rescued by Coast Guard and just, American boaters in that distance between Cuba and Florida is, historically in the hundreds of thousands. So the fact that, Cubans don't really have access to boats and these protected areas, these marine parks, which is where Avalon and the Cuban government have set aside for anglers like us to go enjoy these flats. It's kind of crazy that we're talking about a communist government that doesn't have a pot to piss in. And the dynamics between the world's biggest economy and the world's most powerful nation, which is us, just basically turning their back on the Cuban people for a bunch of reasons. And when you're in Cuba, you see that just in your face. So the fishing, the fishing ground, the habitat is protected by the Cuban government. And, it's bolstered by Cubans don't have boats. It's bolstered by the fact that the Cuban government is really fucking serious about these diving areas, these fishing areas not being exploited and overrun and ruined. So it's a treat to go to Cuba is the bottom line. I had never been to the JDR as far as my trips to Cuba, so this was new. And I'd said a few podcasts ago, it was pretty much promoted as a bonefish permit trip. And it didn't turn out to be that way for our group at large. So my first day, and I'm fishing with my wife, Mrs. East Rosebud. And that's what I'm going to refer to her as from now on. And my wife was really excited about this trip because she's never been to Cuba before. She understands that going to Cuba's got a little bit of moxie to it, and she was excited. Plus, Mrs. East Rosebud wants to do well with a fly rod. So, the stage was set for a good week with the 8 anglers that were there fishing. And on our first day, we pulled this kid. He's not a kid. He's about 40. His name's Oleski. I think I got his name right. And, he really tried to break us into our week with some bone fishing, some permit fishing, some tarpon fishing. But, it just kind of ended up being kind of a small bone morning, which, I'm not into that. Shit, if I can fish to 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 pounders, oh, fuck, I'm into that big time. But they just weren't around on that first day. But as we were getting ready to close out our day, my wife saw a commotion a couple hundred yards away. And basically, it was a group of lemon shark, which I love to fish for, that were crashing bonefish, crashing baitfish, crashing something. You'd see these motherfuckers, a few hundred yards away, and their dorsal fins out, and they're blowing stuff up, they're eating. So Just like he knew, Oleski starts pulling us over there, getting us over there. And as we got closer, 2 or 3 of these lemons started to come right to us. One was too fast, meaning I wasn't ready. I couldn't get the bug in front of him. The other one was deep. He didn't quite see it. So I'm now have gone through 2 or 3 of these lemons coming towards us that we saw, which is why we went over there. And then finally, we see a little bit further away, the big one. And this was a 5, 6, 6.5, foot long lemon. Shallow water. And sure as fuck, this shark just turns and starts coming to us. We were kind of in a little bit of a deeper channel, so you can see these fish using that channel to exit and enter. When we saw them blowing up, fuck, they were doing that in a couple feet of water. So this big lemon comes to us, and I've got time. I make 2 casts right in front of it. And on the second retrieve, I didn't fuck it up. Some people look at my lemon shark fishing as like, what the fuck is he doing? But lemons are tough. I've said it before. Lemons are tough to eat a fly. I mean, they're a voracious fucking critter in shallow water, and most of the guides I fish with fucking hate them. They're kind of like the sea lion on salmon and steelhead. Fucking guides want to shoot them. They just don't care because, they're predators towards what these dudes are fishing for and selling. So this big lemon comes towards us. I plop it out there. I don't choke. I stop retrieving at the right time. And this really nice lemon, boom, eats it probably 10, 12 feet off the front of the skiff right in front of us. And it was a good moment because myself, Mrs. East Rosebud, and our guide kind of knew this first day we had good weather. It was kind of windy, but we just really didn't see a lot of fish. So he eats this thing, and then basically I'm in this fucking 45-minute fight with this lemon trying to wear him down. I mean, it's probably 100, 125 pounds, so it wasn't the biggest I've landed, but it was a big one. And it was just fun because this kid, Oleski, he knew what he was doing. Soon as I hooked up on this fish, and this fish took off well into my backing, this lemon, he was on it. Motor was on, and he started to motor me to this fish, this shark. And, that's a big deal because you'll get some guides that are like, bring him back. And, bringing a fucking 125-pound lemon that never really quite gives up back to you 150, 175 feet, you're just increasing your chance of losing this lemon. And, I really enjoyed fishing with Oleski, even though I only had 1 day with him because we rotate guides every day. It just ended up being really fulfilling because that shark brought all 3 of us together and closed out our day on a real positive note. So the day 1 was fun, and it really gave us a lot of optimism for the rest of the week. So day 2 was much tougher. I pulled this younger kid, Lester. Nice kid, younger, probably bottom of the food chain as far as the group of 4 guides we had that week. But he was good. He worked hard. He got us. It was overcast and it was windy in day 2. I mean, just a fucking beatdown. Our weather for the week overall was good as far as bright. We had the sun. We had the blue skies. But we also had fucking sustained 15, 20, 25 mile an hour winds, which, I can cast in. Made it a little bit tougher for Mrs. East Rosebud to fish, but we could do it. And these guides work hard to find a sanctuary, an area where there's fish, but we're getting a little bit of a break when it comes to the wind. So this day, for a bunch of reasons, day 2 was just a wash. Didn't really catch anything. Lester tried. He saw some tarpon, saw a couple lemons, but it was overcast and the wind was just relentless. So day 2, kind of a bummer, really. And so I got 2 days in the bag, and really, besides that beautiful lemon, haven't really had any success. Our group as a whole, not bad. Nobody was coming back after day 2, not having opportunity, not getting a chance to fish for stuff. So we were having a good week, even though the productivity of this habitat so far was pretty modest. So day 3 comes, and I end up pulling this kid. I can't say his fucking name right. I've tried, I've read it. I just can't get it. It starts with an R. So it's Rodeo or Rodeo, or I'll call him Rodeo. And, I asked all the guides at the start of the week what their specialty is. And these fuckers, they're all like, everybody's specialty is whatever you want to fish for. They got like this unified front on, I'm not going to tell you what I prefer to fish for. Because they want to accommodate you. They're very good. They're very good. That's one thing about Avalon and these Cuban guides. In all the fishing I've done in Cuba, and this is my 6th trip, I don't think I've gotten one fucking ounce of arrogance from 95% of these guides. I mean, they're there to get you on fish, and they're there to fish for what you want to fish for. But let's face it, deep down, all these cats have something they are good at and prefer to fish for, species-wise. So I knew that this kid, Rodeo, and he's not a kid, he's probably 40, his thing was permit. And the entire morning we spent looking for permit. I had a few shots at him. I really want a Cuban permit. You've heard me rail on permit before because I fucking hate them. I've got so many fishless days fishing for these cocksuckers that, I don't even know why I fucking do it. I do it because when it goes right, there's no better feeling with a fly for me. And that's why you endure the non-eats. That's why you endure the difficulty of fishing for permit. But the entire morning, we only saw a few. We got into the afternoon, and I ended up finally catching a couple of baby tarpon. And I caught those fish in off-color water, but I caught those tarpon based on rolling. So you couldn't see them, but when they boiled, if you got that fucking bug on that boil within a couple of seconds, they probably were going to follow what needed. So I got on the board with a couple of baby tarpon, and you've heard the adage, a tarpon is a tarpon. Whether he's 12 inches long or 30 pounds, tarpon is a tarpon. So I was pleased with the opportunity to catch a couple of these fish, and I went back, after day 2 feeling better. Just kind of feeling like, okay, we're going to turn this shit around. Our nights were spent having, really, I'm not going to call them luxury meals, but I'm going to call them above board. I mean, our dinners were amazing. Between the fruit, the salad, the meat dishes, the pasta, there's probably 25 different items to choose from every night for dinner. You get sick of the lobster. That's how much they're serving you this stuff. So the food was really good. So finally, on day three, we get a new guide who I could tell immediately was a tarpon guide. I fucking asked him. I said, yo, what's your specialty? Kid smiles and looks at me and says, tarpon. I'm like, motherfucker, Mrs. East Rosebud wants to catch a tarpon. Let's go. So I look at this kid as we're making our run to this spot, and I'm like, yo, secreto. I'm fucking dead serious. That's secret in Spanish. And I looked right at him, and I'm like, secreto. And he looked at me and says, okay. I was asking him to take us to a spot that he doesn't take just everybody. I got no fucking idea if this was real, but it started off with him taking us through basically a mangrove channel that's overgrown that isn't easy to get through. And I've been through dozens of these damn things, and they're work, they're a hassle, and they're a rod breaker. So just imagine you taking a skiff through overgrowth mangroves to where the branches and the foliage are completely covering the skiff as you're trying to make your way through this channel. So finally we get through it. Mrs. East Rosebud, my wife, she just was smiling ear to ear. She just thought it was so exciting to go through these spots, and it is. It's crazy habitat. I mean, there isn't a fucking 7-Eleven around the corner. I mean, this is the middle of nowhere, and it's real. So we get into this big open area. It's a massive pond, pool, lake that's completely surrounded by mangrove. You could only get in there by crawling through these mangrove channels. And literally within 5 minutes, 7 minutes of cutting the motor, looking, fuck, there was rolling tarpon everywhere. Fucking everywhere. And I was amazed by that because I've done quite a bit of fishing and I've caught some nice tarpon. Nothing huge, but qualifying babies, that's for sure. And I mean, these fish were just fucking rolling. So within, 15, 20 minutes of casting, bam, I got 2 to the boat and I missed another 3 or 4. So, I'm smiling. It's not even 9:30 yet. And I was getting a display of surfacing, breathing tarpon that just was, when it comes to watching fish in the salt experience, that, it's a highlight of my career. They were oblivious to us. He got us out of the wind. I mean, it was really a great experience. And then Mrs. East Rosebud gets up, and I'm encouraging her to fish because she wants to catch a tarpon. That's her only fishing goal of this week, is to catch a tarpon. So, my wife gets up on the front of the skiff, and literally within 15 to 20 minutes of casting, Jesus Christ, I mean, the girl's hooking up. She hasn't landed anything yet, but strip, eat, boom. She just doesn't know yet how to play a fish like a tarpon. And, if you're listening, one of our -3 listeners out there, if you've never done it, you don't fucking either. Even if you can fish, you don't know. It's like a hook set on a rhino in a china shop. They fucking blow up. They go bonkers. Managing them after that is something that you learn by going through that experience. And as Mrs. East Rosebud missed a few of these tarpon, I just kept casually encouraging her, hang in there, keep casting, hang in there. And finally, she catches a nice 9, 10, 12 pounder. And this woman held up this fish, and it was like she was showing you her first baby. It was so exciting for her and so fulfilling for her that honestly, the rest of the week, she didn't get rid of that buzz. My wife looked at me a number of different times during the week and said, guess what? I'm like, what? I caught a baby tarpon. That's what this trip meant to her. And that was the success she had. So I'll get back to the fishing as we get into episode 3. That's the end of episode 2. The Russians are coming. Foul Hooked Whitey is out. Boom.